I'm Clay Vanitas. I run Fairbanks Farm Access. And that's an organization up in Fairbanks that advocates for small farmers. Our main mission is to help small farmers grow and keep farmland. We've recognized that in most of the food systems issues that you come across, the main issue in Alaska I have found is a lack of producers. So in Fairbanks, the North Star district purchases 600 to 800 a week, and they're happy to buy local. And if there's the infrastructure for processing the carrots in a way, or whatever food you have in a way that the kids like to eat, and that's just to say that like the buyers are there. We just don't produce enough. Like producers up in Fairbanks, their CSAs are bought out, and they sell everything they grow pretty much. And so my mission is to identify what the barrier is, and I have found it tends to be land access. So, and land access can mean a ton of different things. It's not just the land in an affordable way, it's also retention of land you have, and we're kind of talking about retention here when we talk about a tax break, because we're talking about just making it cheaper to hold the land that you have. So yeah, so this is called Organized Farmer Tax Breaks. It's going to be an introduction of who I am. Brad St. Pierre and Sam Knapp, two local food farmers, were technically the clients, and because they approached me, and it was a conversation between us three about farmer tax breaks that started this whole thing. And what is this whole thing? This whole thing is Proposition 2, which was part of on the ballot on October 3rd in Fairbanks, and it was a tax break, and we'll get into a little bit more details, but it was a tax break on farm buildings. So these would be buildings that are used to store, cultivate, grow, and harvest crops for consumption. And it was just, it was passed on October 3rd in like a full popular vote. And we'll talk about all those specifics a little bit more, but that's what we're talking. Yeah, we can get into the specifics. So again, it's a total tax exemption. So it's funny, I found yesterday a piece of paper, or a friend of mine handed me a piece of paper of a proposed state legislation to expand the current farm land use assessment tax discount to incorporate buildings. And I found it like a good opportunity to like talk about the distinctions of those two different things, because for you, and going back to your community, it can be helpful to know what those are and how those are different. So every community in Alaska has to provide a farm use assessment for farmland. And all that is a discount, because what it does is it requires your land for its farm use value, and not for its full and true value, which effectively is a discount. So then, yeah, I was like reading this proposed legislation. I don't know if it was a public document, I don't know big about it, but it was on a table, left on a table somewhere. And it said, our amendment is to expand this to farm buildings. And somebody said, oh, was this inspired by you guys passing Prop 2? And I said, maybe it doesn't go as far as Prop 2 goes. So we passed in Fairbanks, it is not a discount, it is a no taxation on those buildings. And so farm building equals, yeah, as I said, growing and storing crops for consumption. So that would not include like peonies. That comes with some complications if you rotate in other stuff. That isn't food, and I think that's going to come down to how the borough assesses it. But we'll kind of talk about like the assessor side of things in a little bit. And so, yeah, we're just getting as more people show up on what we're talking about today. Just so, and again, I run Fairbanks Farm Access, and I'm an attorney by trade, but I help small farmers find land.
Just really quick, so that document is Senator Bjorkman.
Oh, great. Cool. Somebody
draft. So it's
cool.
work draft. It was drafted in September, which basically means it has not been introduced in the
Okay.
legislature yet.
Awesome.
And that's my long introduction of saying, like, now is the time to get those edits. Senator Bjorkman can be like, oh yeah, we want to, he can tell Ledge Legal that we want to change ABC, and they can do it a lot easier now than once it's introduced and going through the committee process.
Great. Okay.
So if there are issues with it where it's not going as far as we'd like it to, or it's going too far in other places,
Okay.
it's a lot easier to change it before January.
Okay. Okay.
Or at least for him to have those discussions with Ledge Legal.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
once January comes, then basically goes through the committee process, and the legislators have to approve everything, and it goes through the whole public process.
Gotcha.
And that's great, but it makes things harder sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Great. So, yeah, and so, yeah.
And he offered the document to,
Cool.
you let your work draft out, it's no longer confidential.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that's super helpful. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate you opening up to like reminding us about comments, because yeah, I mean, one of the main criticisms I hear these days about the farm land use assessment discount currently as it stands is it requires municipalities to do it, and says that the state will reimburse the municipalities for the tax break if appropriated, and it has never been appropriated. So I think it really, my wife is on the Fairbanks Borough Assembly, and so like I feel like local elected officials who are the ones who have to like enforce these tax breaks that don't end up getting appropriated by the state is it can be a bit frustrating. Obviously, they're taking, our community is taking the burden of a tax break. So in any case, we'll get into some of those specifics. If we have time, I'm happy to like chat about the general policy of tax breaks with respect to actually increasing farmland. But this presentation is mainly about how we got this one passed. Might be a more appropriate conversation for like.
This one's passed.
So this was a Proposition 2, I'm sorry. Was a municipal ordinance in the Fairbanks North Borough. This work draft bill doesn't have a number or anything yet, and it's still in the drafting process of the state legislature.
Right. Yeah. So this one was passed in Fairbanks and Fairbanks North Star Borough on October 3rd. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll go back to that slide. So we passed it on October 3rd, and this presentation is about how we got it passed. Yeah. So yeah, just to who arrived recently, that this was born of so in running Fairbanks Farm Access as an organization specifically to help small farmers, this was born of two smaller food farmers approaching Fairbanks Farm Access and saying, hey, there's this tax break, how can we get it passed in our community? So that's what we're talking about today, and we did get it passed. And my abstract of this presentation, what left it in suspense only because the abstract was due before October 3rd. So we didn't actually know how it was going to go. So again, and I'll explain this in a bit more detail, but at the high level, this is a total tax exemption for farm buildings for consumption. So to growing crops that aren't food. So again, it's like it is food security focus, is my understanding of the statute. And so yeah, how it started. Sam Knapp is a local food farmer. He runs Offbeat Farm in Fairbanks, and I was answering a tax question of his related to the farm land use assessment discount and how that works currently. And you know, of it has and use assessment discount, some interesting aspects to it that maybe make some farmers concerned, or, you know, I think there's a lot of disagreement about these tax incentives today in the state. And I think a lot of people are shooting from the hip with their opinions on these assessments. And that's not to say I learn a lot from wise local like food leaders. I just think that there very much needs to be more research into what tax incentives actually lead to increased agricultural production, if that's even the goal. I don't even think there's agreement as to what the goal is, because that's going to change where we set the. In any case, to focus on the process, it was Sam Knapp, this farmer, who pointed out this statute 2945 that says any municipality may pass a total tax exemption for farm buildings. I then looked it up and reviewed it with the borough, our Fairbanks North Star borough attorney, and both of us, and it was weird. It weirdly like didn't, you know, based on some like legal, and I'm an attorney by trade, and based on some of your like legal sources, it was like right at the end, or it wasn't always showing up. And the lesson was one determined farmer versus two attorneys, like, and the determined farmer was the one who found the thing that needed to be found. Maybe no surprise to anybody here. But in any case, so that's what that statute says. It says any municipality may pass this tax exemption. The way it needs to get passed is by getting on the ballot for a popular vote. And so that's a two-step process that we'll talk about. But it needs to get passed by the local assembly, or whoever is the local legislator for the municipality that's passing it. And then it just needs to get on the ballot, and then it needs to go to popular vote. So after that suggestion, I, you know, in running Fairbanks Farm Access, have to ask a couple of questions of myself. Like, one, a virtue of running an organization of one is that I don't have to take on every job that comes my way, and I can ask myself, is this actually good policy? Do I agree with the farmers that this would lead to the outcome that we want? And I think it would, based on research and based on testimonials from some farmers that I eventually did. At the end of the day, farmers in Alaska are facing just prohibitively of keeping land that they already own. And this is one reduction in the capital cost to keeping that land and growing more food. So again, it's focused on food. I personally maybe don't care about that as much. Like, I think a lot of agricultural production involves good food production alone involves diversified growth. And yet I could tell that was the thrust of this statute, was increasing food security. And so I felt it was good policy. It was lowering taxes for small food farmers, a person that we idolize in a lot of our communities, but don't seem to like pony up and support. And so I felt that this was a way to actually do that. Legal, like, how does it legally work? Is it going to be different for the local municipality to get something like this passed? I always ask myself that, because are you gonna meet with resistance from a local city or borough attorney saying, oh, this is far afield of our powers, etc. This was a no-brainer. The state statute said any municipality can do this, and what we ended up doing when I drafted the law that was going to go to the assembly, I just copy and pasted from the state statute, so as not to veer from, not to open or invite the question of whether you can, what the state says a municipality can do. So there's this legal principle where, like, that says generally, if a law says what you can do, it might be prohibiting other options. But that was like a question for the future that I didn't even want to open up. So we stuck to the state statute and felt it was good policy to stick to the state statute. And then the next question is the legislative, would we even get it passed? And that, as I mentioned, and this is helpful to know if you guys, you know, as farmers do what Sam Knapp did and like kind of scour the tax statutes, or probably more applicable, your local tax codes. It says that any through a vote it's essentially, I forgot what this explicit terms are, but it points to through a vote by you know, the people, basically, not just the borough. So the borough needed to pass it by a majority to get it on the ballot, and then the people needed to vote on it, and that is advocacy. Like, so at the borough level, the argument was, and we brought farmers there, and I showed up, and I was just trying to make it very clear that all you're doing today, folks, is deciding whether you think the Fairbanks North Star Borough can make this decision for themselves. You are not deciding whether this is good policy. I guess like at very best, you can step in and say, I think this is so horrific that the people of the Fairbanks even vote on it. And so one borough assembly member felt that way and said no, but the rest said yes. So I'm getting ahead of myself though. Like, first, community need. I was approached by local food farmers about this, so there was already at least some community need. It wasn't, I feel like in the nonprofit space, I'm not a nonprofit myself, I'm an LLC, but sort of operate that way. You get a lot of top-down approaches where somebody has an idea and isn't in a community, or maybe is new to a community, sees that it's not happening and thinks it should get passed. I don't think anybody here believes that's the right way to do things, though it happens often. So I think that this was definitely grassroots, bottom up. Farmers approached and said, how do we get this passed? But then the next step was to actually, you know, poll beyond 2 food farmers who were going to benefit from it. So I didn't do any polling in any kind of scientifically comprehensive way. In light of timing constraints, I polled the food farmers I know, but then I also reviewed a interior Alaska farmer directory that we have, and called every single farmer on the directory to get their opinion about this. Food and non-food farmers, because again, it's about the farming community. It's not about just the direct individuals who will benefit from this, and also other stakeholders, because as I just said, it's not just farmers who are going to be going to the ballot, it's everybody in the community. And when you have a tax break for one group of people, that means a tax burden on the rest. And so obviously the other stakeholders are literally a community who is in a very disparate way taking on a tax burden in exchange for giving a tax break to farmers. And that is a serious commitment by the community. It means money in the wallet and out of the wallet, in exchange for the benefit of food security, I think. But there was some disagreement about that as we moved through. So the upshot of the polling was wide support, I felt, and from a variety of stakeholders too. I felt interesting support from a lot of folks who do logistics of getting food up to Fairbanks. And I mentioned that point about, you know, a tax break for one is a burden for others. And I got a response from one person who said in a meeting that I went to that was really focused on renewable energies and general, and said, oh, you know what else is really, really expensive? When our food supply chain breaks down. And we don't, and I think in Fairbanks, the latest numbers was something like we have food for 5 days if we were cut off contact. Food on the shelves for about 5 days. So I took all of that feedback. It was worth going forward after getting. and helping to get it passed. So I mentioned this, I drafted the ordinance. If anybody in their own communities want to do this as well, reach out to me, let's chat, and I can give you the specific stuff I wrote. It's all public documents because it's a law that was passed, but if it's easy to show you the specific documents that I wrote, or maybe even like comments on the document as I was working through it, I'd be happy to share everything I have on this. Presented it to the assembly and it goes up for public comment. Packed the room with farmers, and by packed, like we didn't really pack it. We brought as many as we could, and who could like spare some time. But the farmers who are there made a huge impact on the assembly members. Huge impact. The assembly members were like just so happy to hear from them. We're happy to hear that farming even existed in Fairbanks. One of the farmers mentioned that that's the CSA I'm on actually, has his root vegetables through March, and that like blew a ton of assembly members away that we can even do that up in Fairbanks. And so really one of the biggest lesson, or one of the biggest lessons of this effort was like farmer forward when advocated, because a lawyer, policymaker, whatever, but the farmers themselves who are being affected, they really took the day. But I'll mention, as a point of serious advocacy difficulty, every election, every like general election in this country really is in the fall, and which is to say that advocating for farm legislation at the local level, at least, I'm not talking about like the federal farm bill, et cetera, which seems to have, who knows, or when debate happens on that, it's all. But for this like local level stuff, the elections are in the fall, which means advocating for farmers, organizing farmers, is very difficult because they're so busy in the summer, in the growing season. So it's like it's one of those peculiar things that arbitrarily, because it's happening in the fall, or maybe if there's a good reason that it's happening in the fall, it happens to make organizing for farm legislation difficult, and requires offloading, dividing that labor to folks like me and Fairbanks Farm Access, so that farmers can just farm. And you're working to the bone, especially with short growing season in Fairbanks. Really shouldn't have to be doing the things that I did, which is like APOC registration and creating a bank account and creating a website for collecting donations, stuff like that. So with those testimonies of the farmers, which were super, super effective, it was passed, I believe, 7-1 on the borough, and not just passed with flying colors, bipartisan support. And they're not partisan on our assembly, but there are certainly political divides, and from all across the aisle support. Even a lot of assembly members were trying to join as co-sponsors. So it seemed like the gaining. So again, all that was though is it was added to the ballot. So we had some people who were like not super familiar with this process, like clapping, and I was chatting with them and like, amazing, you did it. And it's like, no, we allowed the people now to do it. So these circuitous processes are kind of funny, but so
question about
yeah,
that.
sure.
Okay, can it be a special ballot measure, or does it have to be like
I believe the statute required it to be on the general
on the
election.
general?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm not positive about that.
So when you went to the borough assembly there, you said a 7-1 passing.
Yeah.
How many assembly members are there?
There are, gosh, I think there are, or maybe 8 were there that night, but I thought
And one voted against.
one voted against, everybody
The
else
other
for.
said left, let's put it on the ballot.
Exactly. And the one person who, it's an important point actually, like, because from an advocacy standpoint, we need to know what are the, what was the holdup that the one person who voted against it had. And he was mentioning, his issue with it, we can stick with the assembly, his issue with it was, he felt that it was going to be gained. It was a tax break that was going to be gained by non-farmers. I didn't feel that that was an issue because in the statute itself, the way you qualify for this tax break was you have to, which is the qualification for being a farmer for other tax incentives in the state, is you must derive at least 10% of your gross income from farming activity. Assembly member who voted against felt that that was too low, aimed by hobby farmers. Our Fairbanks, the Daily News Miner, our local paper, put out a community perspective agreeing, saying this is going to be gained. I wrote a response saying, look at, if you're a hobby farmer, look at last year's tax return of yours, then go look out at your garden and you tell me that you're making 10% of what you made last year on farming. So
Kind of a technical question, but did the ordinance have a direct like burden of proof as far as like the Schedule F?
no, but it didn't. But that is just like,
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. You know, it's how the assessor is going to do it. So, but it's interesting. So I like that question, because those are moments where maybe with a little bit more time, you might try to figure out those little pieces, because as I'll mention a little later, none of this matters if the farmers are dealing with issues on the assessment side. And farmer assessment and assessor relationships are tough, at least in my community. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but at the very least volatile, like changes year to year, it seems. So that was that problem with it. I didn't feel, again, as I said, I didn't feel it was an issue because the 10% requirement is like for somebody who's not a food farmer as their primary source of livelihood, significant source of livelihood, it's hard to meet that 10% requirement. But once again, I kind of mentioned this at the start. I very much believe that there needs to be funding for deeper research into tax incentives and their effects on farmland production. Because when we talk about that 10% requirement, I have people in my office. I had somebody in my office a couple weeks ago who owns land, who didn't like the 10% requirement, and I heard the exact opposite opinion by somebody the very next day. And so I would like to do that research and I'm looking for funding to do that research, because I just think we need to get like on the same page about this, because I think there's I think that tax incentives have a massive impact on whether farmers are increasing their production and keeping land in their hands.
I have a quick question on
Sure.
that 10%. Is that 10% definition from the federal government, or is that?
It's in the state statute.
It's the
State statute, yeah. It applies to the farm use land
Okay.
discount and this building exemption.
Could I point out that that 10% is on adjusted gross income on your tax form, not gross earnings or anything. It's adjusted gross income on your tax.
Right, and so the debate sometimes is revolved around what entity is owning the land, what entity is the assessor looking into in terms of what you're earning, and that actually applies to, that would apply to the lessor of the land too. So some small farmers say, no, I like the 10% requirement because it requires big landowners who don't want to farm hard themselves to get somebody to come on and lease their land who wouldn't otherwise afford land. So again, these are backs and forths on the goods and bads of this policy that I believe needs much deeper research. So now let's get out the vote. So it's on the ballot, and it's time for us to make sure people know that this is happening. The amount of times I heard during this advocacy, I didn't even know about this, was maddening, because it's like, well, this is what we're doing. We're getting the vote out, so you know about this. Did you expect to, do you follow the assembly every single Thursday night? Because then you know it's on the ballot, I guess. I do, but in any case, so this is like the nitty-gritty stuff that isn't technically difficult. It is difficult if it's your first time, and it is certainly a barrier to entry to to know that initial rule that, that if you are a group, so more than one person who is raising, I think it's $500 or more to influence any election, you must register with the state. And so that registration process, it's not just registration, it's reporting every donation you get, information with those donations, the simple stuff, how to find a website, a campaign website that is geared towards for APOD. Things like that take time that farmers shouldn't have to do, frankly. And so fundraising and fundraising for what? For us, that's a strategy you have to make with your advocates. What's worth spending your money on? For us, we recognize that because it seemed like there was bipartisan support for this, it was just making sure everybody knew it existed on the ballot. Because I could already tell it was going to be confusingly written on the ballot. Like tax breaks are strange because they take taxes away, but the way they're written on a ballot is, do you agree that we should no longer provide or tax farm buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So there's like a positive negative thing going on. And so at the end of the day, what we felt is the confusion that when somebody comes up to the ballot, we just felt understanding it was our main focus. And it was even less than a hardline approach of yes on Prop 2 ads for it. And I think I even said something like, consider voting yes on Prop 2. Just because, again, I felt it was just about understanding. So our fundraising went to signs, it went to ads, Facebook ads, and radio ads. That's all we spent money on, and we didn't do anything other than that. Presentations, meeting with groups will reach out and say, hey, I don't understand this fully. Can you come and talk about it? Definitely, that's the whole point of is explaining and then into the questions. Signs and then you have to make political choices, obviously. But one example of a political choice is there were a lot of candidates up for Borough Assembly and for the school board at the time, and multiple reached out saying, hey, can we partner on this? Can I'm already doing all this outreach to get elected. Combined with your effort to get Prop 2 passed. And that's when, as an advocate, I think it's time to stop and talk to your clients and check in again, because that is a deeply, deeply political choice, both political from the sense of what's going to get it passed, and also just from like, what do you want this proposition associated with this candidate? At the end of the day, our conversations on that question came down to, because it was such a bipartisan issue and because the candidate election gets a bit partisan, even if it's not officially so at the assembly level, we decided to just not connect with any candidates, keep it its own thing. And that came down to not just like official meetings, but when I was holding signs, or when Brad St. Pierre, one of the farmers, was holding signs, we specifically would like stand with one group on one side of the street and then run over and stand with the other group. Like, so like never stand with one group for too long. And again, because again, the partisan issue at all. You either agree with the tax, you don't. I don't think it falls into partisan lines. And we found that folks from all sides of the aisle were supporting it. So we wanted to ride that momentum. The way to ride that momentum was not to raise too much of a fuss about it. And we weren't seeing a really strong concerted no onto effort, and didn't want to galvanize that by maybe overstepping. So, and again, that's a risky choice. Like you don't know if maybe we didn't get the word out well enough. It comes with costs. It's not just, and it wasn't obvious to us in the moment, I guess I'll say. So yeah, so what are the oppositions? As I said, a tax burden on one, or a tax break for one person is a burden for others. So there was some opposition there. I think though that the most surprising opposition for me was, because that wasn't like a very, that tax burden concern wasn't a huge, Though I will say on that point, as part of the research for Prop 2, the first thing, I should have said this before, the very first thing I did, which is what everybody should do, I think, is what's Matsu doing? What's anybody else doing in the state? And I could not find any other municipality who had passed this. So that's either you look into what the reasons for that were. I think generally there is not a lot of small farmer lobbying going on, or advocacy. There used to be a Tanana Valley Farmers Association, but I learned from Joe Papp, a storied farmer and historian in our town, that it stopped at with World War II and then never really picked back up again. But maybe that would be the type of organization that would organize to get this thing passed. But like the local farmers market doesn't really want to get involved with in a political decision, rightfully so. And so I think that maybe I was getting the sense that maybe it hadn't passed because there's not a lot of lobby for the people it would most benefit, which tends to be smaller farmers. Because like for big farmers, and is the dog, like the buildings are the tail. For small farmers, like Sam Knapp, he uses a shed as a root cellar, and that's how he can have crops through March. And that's where I go to pick up my CSA, and that would be the type of building that would be exempt from taxes. So, but we did kind of learn that the Matsu maybe hasn't passed it because, in light of how big of a slice of the pie farming is in the Matsu, it might have actually been a concerning tax burden to lose that tax base. Again, I don't know if that's the case. I would love to do some research on that because I think we need to understand that more, and I don't believe we do. So in any case, we have this was more surprising for me, was some non-food farmers and some very established farmers. And when I say established farmers, I mean ironically, to survive as a farmer, diversify beyond food, and then so may not benefit from this tax break if they're doing something in their buildings that is not food for crops for consumption. And I found some pushback from them, saying doesn't benefit me. I disagreed with that position because it doesn't benefit me, and I'm still going to vote yes on it. So I do believe that even if it doesn't benefit you very specifically building on your property, it might still be worth passing. But that's a debate. I don't want to caricature their position because I believe it was absolutely a legitimate one. And if anybody shares that position, I'm very, very happy to discuss it in more detail, maybe after this presentation, because again, it's a legitimate position. It just wasn't my position on the matter. And so we did meet some resistance in that way, in the form of, these people, these are very established farmers, have these amazing, email listservs of their CSA folks, or the people who come to their greenhouses, and et cetera. And so getting the sense of maybe that they were, putting out the word saying, hey, no, this is a problem. There was also folks who felt that this was a way to game in marijuana hydroponic buildings. Luckily, because I didn't feel it was necessary at the time, but it turned out to be necessary, one added a preamble to what was passed saying this does not apply to marijuana growers, despite the fact that you could make a strong argument for certain marijuana derived products being crops for consumption. You consume some of them. And so to cut that off at the head, I guess, it was added as a preamble that it does not apply to assembly members. And so as a point of advocacy for folks, one of our farmers was very good at responding to Facebook comments to our ads. And that had a huge, all these points of oh, is this just the way the marijuana industry does X, Y, and Z? And it would, instant reply, nope, it says in the preamble that it's not going to apply. If somebody were to push back and dig deeper, ask a more sophisticated legal question, like how much does a preamble sentence bear on the law? That would be a great question. We'd have to talk about that for a while, but because I was having that concern a little too. So in any case, that's all we heard. It was minimal, often cleared up with just a conversation. and certainly didn't, not organized. And yeah, so learning on the fly, like this one's going to be obvious, but making adjustments while advocating for something that is already on the books and is going to be voted on can hurt the stomach, I think, because you're like, it's there. I hope we did it right. You know, I hope this is the right approach. And obviously the way you would avoid that feeling is by better research up front, making sure you polled everybody, making sure you reviewed the policy thoroughly and you believe in it. But you know, that's in a perfect world. I should say, and I'm probably going to repeat it, I did this for zero money, no funding. I just felt it needed to happen. And so had we had more funding or more time, maybe, you know, we can spend that time. But at the very least, you learn lessons for next time. You learn about how we would have possibly changed going forward in how we approached the thing. And this last bullet point is remembering why we started. I had just been kind of yelled at by a farmer, and I was getting back in my car and not feeling great. This was a farmer who felt that it wasn't going to benefit them specifically because they do things other than crops for consumption. So why get it passed? I responded because food farmers need to be able to survive in this economy and need to make more food. She didn't agree, that's fine, but wasn't feeling great. And then I read an article about some farmers organizing, some dairy farmers organizing, and I was reinvigorated on my way to work that morning, remembering that at the end of the day, food farmers approached me and said, this will help us survive, end of discussion, period, for me, which helped us continue going. So yeah, the results were 78% voted yes, of voters voted yes. And I put up the second or the third bullet, I guess, just so people get like a sense of what's going on in Fairbanks. I think that this is probably pretty common in most municipalities, that only 20% of registered voters tend to vote. That's actually kind of high. Yeah.
Matsu just last week, it was 9%.
9%. Oh my goodness. Yeah, like that's incredible. Yeah, so
20, I'm happy.
yeah, exactly. And that was across the ballot too.
Yeah.
So on everything. And
political stickers, we voted more.
yeah, and so and I guess the other point of that is from an advocacy perspective is certain issues or certain candidates galvanize voters and then end up having them vote on your proposition too. so it can, that number, that percentage can fluctuate based on the interest of your specific proposition, but maybe something else that was also on the ballot at the time. So we're not going to claim that 20% is because of Prop 2, but you know, in any case, these were the results, and super excited about them because, and I should share this story. In the text thread with the farmers who organized for this, one of them said that like it can be hard in the current economy to feel as though anybody about us as food farmers. It doesn't feel like they do, based on the status quo that exists, and that makes sense to me. It doesn't feel like they do, and yet this person went on to say, but a vote like this, 78% voting yes, shows that at least in a small way, maybe they do. And that, you know, was like warmed my heart, but it also made me think, okay, what's the disconnect going on here? Like, why do we express this immense support for food security, for food farmers in particular, for the people doing this work? And yet those food farmers don't feel supported in any way. And it's not just like their feelings, it is the status quo that exists. Why is there that disconnect where we say we care about them, they don't feel cared about, and the laws on the books don't seem to show care? And one conclusion I came to was organizing. There's just a lack of organizing. And what you're doing is you're not organizing farmers. You're not only organizing farmers, you're organizing the community to express an appreciation through a vote. So there is this disparate appreciation and care happening in the community, but it's not being organized into a tangible decision that can be made yes on to. So that's not to like toot our own horn. It's mostly just to say, probably the most important lesson we learned is that you need to, that just a general appreciation for is not enough. You have to lead it into a way that folks can actually act on it, and they're busy and going about their lives and can only, can shop local, can make a lot of consumer choices, which are hugely important. But everything we just talked about, all that work we just did, it takes somebody and some farmers to do it. And it takes funding to keep doing it. So that's what we're talking about, the future. None of this, to me, none of this matters. None of it is important, should show up on any grant report, should show up on any advertising of anybody's work, if it doesn't actually lead to the food farmers getting the tax break. And that is going to come down to the farmer assessor relationship, and specifically how the borough eventually tax break and applies it, and goes out and reviews adjusted gross income. Most importantly, what's going on in the building. I can see issues with that galore. When you put a tractor in there, is storage a problem? These are going to pop up. These issues are going to happen, and especially if a current administration, I'm not saying anything about this current administration, but because this is about the far future, this isn't about a good relationship you happen to have with the assessor today. This is about what's going to happen in 10 years when it's a completely different person showing up on your property. What's going to happen for your children when it's another different person showing up on your property, when it's a totally different mayor or assembly makeup. It's about binding those folks' hands to a rule that is clear and that benefits you, and that doesn't end up leading you tearing your hair out because we went through all this work to get it passed and it's not actually benefiting you. And so in any case, I just see as our work nowhere near. We have got to make sure that the farmers are actually getting the tax break, and that takes funding. As I said, I did this all with zero funding because I believed in it, and I consider it to be my job. But we need support to keep doing it happen. I can't do this sustainably without it.
Kind of going to your previous point about the assessor, now, are you seeing issues with the clarity of state law that the assessor may or may not be interpreting correctly, that needs to be shored up a little bit?
No, I think it's,
or was this primarily like a municipal ordinance and?
well, so the that we passed is exactly the state law.
Yeah.
Right. So it's both, I guess.
Yeah.
But the issue is that even reading through the law front to back, there's points of discretion for sure. So there's going to be moments where the assessor is exercising discretion in deciding, as I mentioned, like storage. I don't want to give ideas of how you might not provide this tax break to food farmers, but I can see them happening.
Or pressure from the state assessor, I don't,
Yeah, it's possible.
In Fairbanks, there are other tax issues, if you will.
Right.
That are happening as well, and it's kind of all going back to what the state law said.
Right. It's true. And the state law also says that municipalities will be reimbursed for this burden, which they don't do. Yeah.
That was what I was gonna ask on is that reimbursement.
That is not part of this one.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, theoretically, it would be what on the borough's burden to say we gave this much away in tax relief, the state owes us this much back.
Yeah. So it's a good question. So it's like a lot of people say, like, who's the person who's going to do that?
Yeah, right.
Or like with the Department of Law. I don't know. Like that's an intermunicipality, like municipality versus state kind of
Right.
issue, but it applies for not across the spectrum with tax breaks
So
for municipalities.
Is that only that tax break that you mentioned in the state code,
Yeah,
does that only apply if you pass a proposition? So I know, like, I'm in the Matsu, and if you can petition to the assessor that you are a farmer, you show the 10%.
Yeah.
You know, income, and they give you a tax break.
right.
And you have to argue with the assessor to get that, but they're pretty lenient on that. I have not heard of them going back to the state and saying, hey, we gave this guy a tax break, you should give us the extra.
Yeah, so,
subsidy.
yeah.
I haven't heard that loop, I guess.
I haven't either, and I think there's just there's a break in that chain,
Okay.
which I don't believe. But I don't know, it's a good question, it was like,
Technically, don't have any lost income, because the
Right.
state subsidizes.
exactly, that theoretically, but but it says if appropriated, and so the legislator needs to appropriate, and they never do.
Gotcha.
And they don't, it's not just that they never do on this one, they never do on a lot of different tax breaks
Mhm.
that are mandatory for a municipality to pass.
Gotcha.
So that's what's most frustrating, is like, okay, well, we're forced to, and it's not being, so in any case, like, I think that is all relevant, for me in my advocacy, is, from the perspective of how does that gap bear on an assessor's willingness or an assessor's points of discretion. So how does that bear on whether an assessor is going to give it to you or not, if there's a gray area, which there are a lot of. Does it mean when they go back to their boss is feeling this pressure from just a general, like, the ball falls on the side that maybe. So anyways, that's just to say that, like, it's not just no funding for Fairbanks Farm Access to continue doing this work. It's like no funding for the municipality to really make it work. So looking for funding to continue that. And I'm gonna, be keeping very close relationships with these farmers who are benefiting from it, and constantly hearing about how it's going.
Seems like one way to address this would be to convene one of your favorable county commissioners or borough, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
And sue your farmer advocate, the assessor right in the front of the process. and say,
yeah,
We'd like to sit down and make these tough calls with, make it a collaborative process, do it before he starts thinking about it very much, and
that's a great idea.
then people make those choices together.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think that provides a sense of buy-in by state staff to the process, because in public debate with our assembly, a lot of times it's assembly members asking questions of state staff, and it can feel adversarial. And I think one source of that adversity is that certain, a lot of staff or local staff, borough staff, it's like, I didn't make this rule, I just have to find a way to apply it. And so that lack of agency or buy-in, I think leads to a lot of the problems. And so I think this is a great idea, and I'll take it to the folks who we organized, because I think it can have a significant effect on folks that are actually, at the end of the day, making the decision on the ground, which is whether you get this tax break that we're so happy passed. Yeah.
There.
Sure.
Move up. Yeah,
Yeah, if you have any more questions, I'm happy to chat outside. Thanks.
thank you, but
So my name's Iva. This is, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Sinead. And are you sharing online?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Oh, and I'm,
Yeah, and we work at Rural Alaska Community Action Program on the GROW program. And I'm just gonna do, first of all, a little introduction. Rural Cap. But yeah, these are just some pictures of us, and then some of the other employees who have joined us throughout the past couple of years in some different communities. Erica actually was a GROW. Where's Erica? Oh, she left. Okay. Yeah. she
and
was-
Myra,
And Myra,
Myra.
yes, Myra was also,
and we have Grow Adjacent.
yeah, 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 and then some folks in Elam and Stebbins and other places. So yeah, just a quick overview of Rural Cap. Our mission is to empower low-income Alaskans and improve quality of life for low-income Alaskans. And we're a really large organization. We were founded in the '60s as part of an effort to fight the war on poverty. So we are part of a national network of CAP agencies, which are community action programs. Alaska. And the reason that I have a picture of a Toyo stove up there is because there's a really interesting history with Rural CAP bringing Toyo stoves to Alaska through our for-profit enterprise, which is Rural Energy Enterprises. So we're like that's actually a different organization than Rural CAP, but it was created by Rural CAP. So if you know Toyo stoves, then yeah, Rural CAP was part of that, which I think is really, I just love Toyo stoves, so I don't know, I get excited about that. Yeah, so like this national network, and basically it just allows us to get some federal funding that is specifically allocated for these sort of organizations. And we provide services in education, housing, and health and well-being. So our program is under the health and well-being, and there's a bunch of different programs under that do like youth programming, tribal justice, like support for tribal courts, violence shelter in Hooper Bay. So we're just, yeah, we have like more than 400 employees. So if you might know more about something that Rural CAP does than I do, because it's just kind of a big organization.
All right. Thanks, Iva. So I will give an introduction to the GROW program, which Iva started in 2021. It was a CARES Act program, so COVID response money. And we were able to issue an RFP to ask people, ask communities, what do you want for food, to help food community. The response was, of course, huge. And it was really a great program because, remember the CARES Act was like getting money out to communities quickly. So there was not a lot of onerous requirements. It was basically, what does your community need? And so the responses were really community driven and individualized to those communities. So lots of different projects. And we were able to fund about 40% of the application. So it does show there's a big need that, we couldn't fund all of the projects. So our approach for technical assistance, we use this multi-tiered system of support. We call it basically this pyramid where everybody can have access to our webinars. We have outreach for everyone. And depending on the need of the project, we can connect to other resources, or if the community really wants and needs it, we can do a site visit. So we try to, make our approach flexible depending on what people need. And so over the last 2 years, we've reached 17 different communities and created some jobs. These are good jobs, but they work well in communities where, of course, there are not a lot of opportunities, and they also work well with subsistence schedules. So we're excited about that. And that funding stream has kind of dried up, although we still have some projects that are finishing into May. We do have 4 other funding streams that we've been applying for and acquiring over the past year. So Sinead's going to be running this community foods project that's with the communities of Cordova, Haines, and Lime Village. And then we're also a subcontractor for Tribes Extension, and I'll talk more about that later. We also have a small farm to school grant here, a national farm to school grant here in Anchorage, working with 4 Title I schools. And then coming soon, you need to stay to the end of the program to find out about our USDA community forest grants. We're going to be offering some programs that an RFP will be issuing very soon about that. So those are our current projects. And we do have a story map if you want to check out what, we have just a list of all the different communities and what's going on, and so you can check that out. But for right now, we're going to go through just some of the successful features of the programs we've done so far, and I'll turn it over to Sinead.
Yeah, so if any of you guys open up that story map, this kind of follows quite a few of those communities. So here with hydroponics, Alaska has a really short growing season, so a lot of people choose to grow indoors as a way to expand growing opportunities. This is in Seldovia. The leader of this project already had a small hydroponics business. So it was really easy for her to expand and incorporate this program into the school. And then in Shungnak, the local school has a garden called It's a We Community Garden, and it's pretty long-standing. It's student-run, and it's highly incorporated into their science and math curriculum. And like Emily was saying, the Grow model is rooted in meeting people where they're at and providing site-specific assistance. Shungnak required very little technical assistance from us. They just needed the money, and that's all they needed, you know, and so we're able to adapt and just provide what is needed. Whereas in Seldovia, Grow is highly involved in the grant process through meetings, site visits, connection with experts, and helping pick out hydroponic setups.
No.
Ooh.
Alright.
Now I'm gonna pass it over to Emily to talk about soil building.
So a big issue in a lot of rural communities is how to build soil. We did, you know, Cheryl's got a great recipe, she teaches out in Nome. It's like 1 part's compost, 1 part sand, 1 part native soil. And, you know, I'm not gonna lie, our approach is to meet people where they're at. So in Elam, we did ship out a pallet of fishy peat, which thanks to the beauty of bypass mail was actually not that expensive, but it's not something that we really want to do. You know, we want to do more sustainable agriculture and soil building. So you can see, you know, and they did, when we were there in the middle of June, they didn't have seaweed yet to use as like their organic material, but later on in the season, they did have that and they were able to go out and collect it. You know, in Gullivan, they had massive flats of dead eelgrass that washed up that was great for collecting and putting in their community garden. Also, ironically, the Merbach storm that devastated the community also eroded where they were able to collect a lot of soil and add that into their garden bed. So it really varies by community. So this in Tetland, you know, you can see they have this kind of big pile of native soil, sort of just dirt, where they need to add a lot of organic material to boost that soil ecology, get it going. So it just depends on the community, and we try to work with each one. And so because of that, composting is really important.
Yeah, just like soil building, all communities have different resources for composting. And there's a need to develop compost in order to create healthy soil. As a lot of other people I've spoken to, shipping is unsustainable, so people have to communities. And Stebbins, they had already been experimenting with composting in this fish code. But through local hires that Grow was able to pay, and Grow's assistance, Stebbins was able to establish the community garden as well as a much more efficient composting system. And then in Metlakatla, they found a really successful model of composting that is collecting food scraps in these buckets, and then they're dropped off in town with instructions on what can and can't be composted. And then the amazing community garden coordinator there, who we'll talk about a bit later, also picks up coffee grounds from the local coffee shop, collects fish waste, and shredded paper from the tribal office as a source of carbon, which is pretty sweet. And then in Wrangell, they used Grow funds to purchase.
Hang on.
One thing I was struggling with, and maybe it's just my problem, but when I get these shredded paper, people put credit cards in there, and I have shredded credit card.
Ooh.
You don't have that problem?
No, I can't answer that question, but.
Okay.
But you know, I mean, just sympathetically, I do like this, you know, time you're going to grab like a bag of leaves, a bag of grass clippings, you're always like, oh, you know, I hope this person didn't use weed and feed or whatever.
The needles are in there.
No.
Oh, God, anyway.
But yeah, here in Wrangell, our first Grow RFP, they were one of our grantees, and they bought this commercial composter, which was really exciting. not very many communities have commercial composters, so we connected them with a lot of experts and helped with research to figure out which would be the best for them. And this, alongside with their outdoor composting system they have at their local community garden, which is really lessons to waste and helps build a lot of healthy soil. Emily's gonna talk about some other growth projects.
I really want that composter.
Yeah,
That
it's a pretty
electric
sweet
one.
composter.
It costs
It's really
$10,000,
cool.
but it does 20 pounds of food a day in 24 hours, and then you get this incredible product.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a story for another time. So a lot of communities are really interested in edible native plantings, and this was, so we helped connect them. This was a cultivar of service berries. And then, we connected them with Tican to do plant walks in their community to learn about native plants. So the community of St. Paul used their grow money to create a entire subsistence curriculum. They used it in culture camp with young kids and some of their just the kids in the schools, and it was entirely their own idea. They put it together and we just helped them get it going and keep it going. And then even here in Anchorage school group that we have some native plants in the school garden that the teachers are able to use classroom to teach kids. And now I'll turn it over to Iva.
Yeah. So another theme that emerged in this work is food distribution, and sometimes like you grow a bunch of food and then you're like, oh, how do I get this to people to eat it? So like one of the art grow employees, Amanda, she used Facebook a lot to advertise and also educate people on some of the plants that they grew that people weren't familiar with, like collard greens. And then they also distributed produce to others, pretty common in most of the communities that we've worked with. And then like some communities kind of take advantage of institutions to do the food distribution, like schools and senior meal centers. And then, yeah, we also worked with a couple of food banks, so that makes it a little more straightforward, just putting stuff in to people's food boxes in Nome and Copper Center. Yeah, and then engaging youth is really something that I guess I didn't necessarily like think was gonna be super important. I don't know why, but it just emerged throughout pretty much all of these projects as a really important aspect of making them successful. Like obviously building up the next generation and their knowledge of these things and investment in them, but then also just the fact that like kids don't have jobs, or if they do, sometimes they're these programs, like a youth employment and training program where they are kind of like a captive audience. That's a good way to get like community engagement in gardens is through the youth employment programs. Kayana has
There's also funds out there for communities to get youth employment programs.
Yeah.
So, and Rural Cap has a program that can help communities connect with that, so if you're interested.
yeah, there's a state run like youth training and employment program too. Yeah, their nonprofit that we worked with there is actually youth like after school programming oriented. And then Kodiak, they were more like already an agricultural community here, and so they and Nome, it was the Boys and Girls Club that was involved, which we've been doing some farm to school stuff. So just lots of ways to connect with youth, and they always enjoy it, and it just benefits everyone.
Yeah. So in rural communities, engaging youth really does go hand in hand with engaging the whole community. There isn't one without the other, and getting community buy-in is crucial to the success of rural community gardens. In Stebbins, the grow team had a garden bed building barbecue party with the local hires, and the whole community came out. And events like these are just a really great way to get the community out and engaged. probably one of the best ways. Same here in Nome, during the summer of 2022, Nome Garden saw a lot of community engagement due to the efforts of the paid garden coordinator, Myra. Yeah. And the centralized location of Nome Community Garden right in the middle of town is also really awesome, creates a lot of foot traffic, and therefore more interest, people are always walking by. We used funds to install benches there, which was really great, because that created people could just hang out, get coffee store and just sit in the garden on sunny days, and that's another really big engagement in community garden spaces within the garden where people can just hang out and feel it really helps with engagement. And yeah, again, work parties. We had a really great work party in Nome, even made the Nome Nugget. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, great turnout. Yeah. Okay, and then here in Haynes, community engagement, the driving force behind that is their amazing group of volunteers, and also Erica, who leads. She's, you know, leading all the community garden stuff in Haynes and the Chilkat Valley in general. And through workshops, kid camps, and fun work days, that's been the main ways they've been engaging in the greater Haynes community, and also connecting with surrounding communities in the upper Chilkat Valley. So season extension, that's another really important thing, obviously. It's important to all of Alaska, and it's important for different regions. In the Bering Strait region, the Nome Garden greenhouses to increase temperatures and shade plants from the harsh winds.
Just to add an idea, that hoop house is an old weatherport tent frame. So a lot of communities, you know, people get those weatherports, and then when the cover, when the cover dies, it's expensive to replace them, and that's what that is.
Yeah.
That plastic was just off Amazon. It was like not expensive. We replaced it in
It's-
2022.
But it's the greenhouse plastic.
Yeah, you have to
You
make
need
sure.
to
it's
use the greenhouse this way.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Because especially in the villages, so much of that stuff just gets up there and it's.
Exactly, that's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
I interrupted.
We used Glenn and all of the holes.
Nice.
It was my farmer's market tent. And a greenhouse.
Nice, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
There was a nice publication that Jeff Spank put together for extension on this, doing this type of greenhouse setup. And one of the cool things was to use wire, like your head wire.
Oh, yeah.
Some rigidity,
Mm.
not like all
Yeah,
cross bracing.
that's super interesting. I'd like to read that, yeah. Another thing with season extension is low tunnels, like on these raised beds on the right. Gnome Gardens started to install some of them, which is, you know, just creating the same effect as the greenhouses, allowing to grow a greater variety of foods and expanding the very short growing season, and also, yeah, harsh winds. Metlakatla, they've got this really large great greenhouse, and in Southeast Alaska, greenhouses are important to not only increase temperatures, but protect against the rainwater especially. So their large greenhouse has been a great model for other Southeast communities, and we'll talk more about that later. In Cordova, they built these really neat raised beds this past summer through some rural cap funds. They're covered, as you can see, and they've got like a hinged opening. They're pretty unique and neat. And yeah, again, to protect from too much rainwater draining the nutrients out of the soil. So yeah, now I'll pass it over to Emily to talk about the big partnership that we do.
And just to clarify, you know, all of those pictures, I mean, it's clear, you know, some of the projects we originated, but like a lot of the projects we were just helping continue or adding a new feature on or shoring something up. Tribes Extension is another piece of the Grow program, and it's our hope, we can continue the projects that we already have and then reach new communities, and Tribes Extension helps us do that. We're all familiar with cooperative extension. I always think it's a weird word. There's lots of cooperative extension folks in the room, but it's the bridge from the university out to communities and helping to bring academic science knowledge to communities. And Tribes Extension is like cooperative extension, but for tribes. And it may look, a lot different in Alaska, depending on what community you're going to or what the community needs are. But there's lots of ways that Tribes Extension can help. And we do try to reach tribes throughout Alaska. So some of you may be familiar, Heidi Rader kind of originated the program, I think, and she worked with Tanana Chiefs for like 15 years. And then just recently, a year or so ago, got a grant to reach tribes throughout Alaska. And that's why Rural Cap is helping, just because we have a big reach in rural Alaska. And really, the work can look a lot different. I think they've done a great job of teaching the USDA about how farming looks different in Alaska and how it can incorporate traditional knowledge and a lot of subsistence activities. There's Heidi right there, like she knew I was saying her name. So it could include, work with foraging or, education on foraging. A lot of times it includes things about preserving foods. It could include traditional ways, but also gardens or, community gardens, which in a lot of, there's a lot of Alaska communities that have a long tradition of gardening and some don't. So it's just another tool for resiliency in different communities. And we like to encourage people to, it's like side by side that, you can have your, traditional subsistence activities with maybe less traditional gardening activities. I will say one thing we found when we went to Orange Strait, a lot of different communities there this summer, is that wherever we go, people would say like, oh, my grandmother used to have a large garden and, nobody has it anymore. And it made me really curious, like that, a lot of this knowledge is not being saved or it's being lost just because we haven't tended to focus on gardening. It doesn't seem like an Alaska native thing, but it really is. And there's a lot of traditional knowledge out there that I hope can, keep being collected and saved so we don't lose that. So Tribes Extension can offer lots and lots of different workshops. This is just a of them. We do have a flyer. You can click on a QR code and see the different workshops and you can sign up. Tribes Extension teachers will travel. This is Sarah Lewis. She sometimes even takes her boat and her bicycle to communities in Southeast to reach people. And then this is just a sample workshop. So this was where, tribes, an extension teacher, Leslie Jones, cooperated with Molly Caradwin, who's a traditional knowledge bearer, and they did a workshop in Galena. And they also had a local person there as one of the teachers. So Tribes Extension can pay traditional knowledge holders in your community to help spread that knowledge. There's a shop seed starting, so some basic community gardens, all kinds of things. And it can be in person, through distance, print materials, could be just connection to experts. So there's lots of possibilities. And here's the QR code. So if you get to the website and you want to request a workshop, it'll kind of look like this Google form. All right, and I'll hand it to Iva.
Yeah. So this past fall, we hosted, really did in hosting our first community garden workshop in Metlakatla. Working with Gageta, who's the garden champion down there, and basically it's like a train the trainer model, like getting community. This first one was just for the Southeast region. So it was just people coming in and sharing their knowledge with each other and also learning from local people and from Gageta, and then like Emily taught some, and we also had a cooperative extension agent there teaching food preservation stuff. So it was a good like networking event and also learning. And we're gonna do another one in the spring, and I think it's gonna be open to more statewide. We have some funding to pay for travel, but not a lot. So trying to get more. Yeah, it was a really good time. And I think one thing, we want more hands-on this next time around, and we're really gonna try to get like a lot of work done for Gakyeta, so come ready to work. Yeah, that's our group. We had a good time. I forget, did I pass it to you now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so another part of our tribe's partnership is this Grow webinar series that we've been on for the past 2 winters. So if you scan those 2 QR codes, you can see the series from the 2 past winters to get a gist of what they're like. We also had a little mini series called Cooking with Alaska Gathered and Grown with Molly Sergwin, and that was really great. Some of the other topics we've done are sheep in rural Alaska, gardening with the subsistence calendar. These webinars are really just a great way to highlight community voices, connect folks, and learn about available resources.
Are they posted on YouTube? Or-
Yeah,
So you can just kind of use another resource forever.
yeah,
2 seasons.
Two seasons.
Yes.
It's
If you just go like Rural Cap YouTube and then click on playlists.
It's also on our papers up
Yeah.
here, we'll give you guys. And this is a rough idea of what this winter is gonna look like. But if you have any topics you would like to see, or if you would like to speak on a certain topic, or you know someone that would like to, please reach out to us. You know, as I said, this is not totally finalized, and we really want to hear from you and highlight your voices.
We will pay you. If
And
you're
yeah,
not getting
we
paid by
pay
your
you.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, and let's
Yeah.
talk about this new
So everybody
opportunity.
stayed for our big announcement. We are really excited to announce we have a urban and community forest grant, sub-grant to, we're hoping 9 different communities to build orchards and food forests. It has to be in a disadvantaged community. We don't have the details yet. We're like signing the paperwork. We expect the RFP to be out like December, January. Okay. January. But we're hoping that we can get started this season, and the features of the Grow program is that we always try to have local hires in the community. So the grant would include, it's a 5-year grant. It would include a part-time position in the community to learn about growing fruit trees. You know, we would provide the training, you know, and to maintain it and hopefully get it up and running and sustainable, you know, for a long time. So that will be coming soon. And if you're on our newsletter list, then you'll get information about that. And we're partnering with Boyer's Orchard here in Anchorage. If you know Yael Hickok, she's an expert in fruit trees. And we'll also be connecting to lots of other experts. We haven't even written the RFP yet. So like, if you feel like you have important feedback for us on what it should look like, you know, just let us know. All right, so really, I hope that, you know, you can see we love our jobs, we're really privileged, and we really take a lot of joy in the work that we do. So please let us know if we can help bridge to your community, and thanks for listening. Are there questions?
We have 1 minute.
Oh, okay, yeah. You know, there's lots of different varieties. I mean, it could be like fruits, like bushes, cherry trees, things that are low growing, but possible, you know, maybe part of the money is to build a high tunnel where you could have maybe greater, you know, apple trees, other things.
Or
So
native plants like into a community, like, you know, like in the urban environment. I think we're still like ironing out the details, but we want to make it as inclusive as possible. So I definitely, like, if you have feedback and ideas about how to make this opportunity inclusive to northern communities, I think we'd really
I like that. Like mile out.
No, I mean, it really depends. I mean, so a key thing is gonna be who owns the land and do you have permission to use it for a long time? But, yeah,
That's a good question that we should talk to our funders about, because it was advertised as like an urban, thing, so,
yeah,
so I'm not sure. We
Yeah.
should Definitely clarify that.
right. And, what was I gonna say? We're also, we've read, we're trying to do a lot of research right now about things that have been done before that didn't work. So we're especially interested, like if you know of examples of, so that we can avoid mistakes, that would be awesome to know about. But, yeah, there's a lot, there's actually, I mean, part of it could be trials, because there's a lot of, fruit that like the pioneer fruit growers know about, that they're like, yes, we were talking, it's like, yes, absolutely, this could be grown in Kotzebue, it could be grown in Nome. And, you know, somebody has to try it.
At our community garden right now, we have the existing fruit.
Could be, it's, you know, it just depends on like if there's gonna be an expansion or not. It does have to be a disadvantaged community though, so it does, like, I don't know, I mean, we have some tools for looking at that. And we also know Title I schools are available, are eligible.
One idea is absolutely amazing in that, like. Two, have you, when you were talking about youth engagement, it made me think of Annabelle with UAF Chuckey campus. Have you done any work with her?
We've talked to her a bunch of times, and I know, you know, has a vision, of like training all of the communities in the, you know, the Northwest. And that's something we're trying to do right now. We're working, hopefully to have a professional development in Fairbanks Street. But it would be awesome to do something similar up the Kotzebue.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's been awesome watching the years that grow that has taken over time and the community engagement. It's been a lot of fun.